I recognize, first of all, that for somebody who's also been trained in fiqh and so forth, one of the very important things that our Sharia demands, in fact, is, and it will mention, you'll see this, and you ask any kind of mufti or anybody who's trained in this particular area from the Islamic tradition and science, whenever certain discussions are, or certain experience and expertise advice is required for Muslims to act upon medical advice, what it normally would state in the books of fiqh is it needs to be a tabib hadiq. Tabib hadiq wa Muslim. So somebody who is an expert Muslim doctor. So not just any doctor, but a doctor who has expertise within a particular area, somebody who's adil, who is somebody who's upright, and somebody who is a Muslim, somebody we can trust in the sense that they are accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and also accountable to Muslims generally. Now, if you wish to take what Dr. Munir from his expertise and his experience, remember that Dr. Munir is also accountable to the community. If he's saying something and it is clearly merged with certain self-interest or conflict of interest, then he will be held accountable for that information. So he is talking with his own reputation on the line. Now, if you wish to trust him, you can trust him. If you wish not to trust him, then that's your way. That's how you want to go, then that's fine, not a problem. The question I would ask is, who are you trusting? Because clearly you are. I can't believe that any of you are absolute experts in this area, so you are clearly taking the word of somebody. Now I want to question you, who are you trusting on these details? Okay, before I continue, let me now begin with our panelists. So first of all, we have Shaykh Abu Eesa Niamatullah. Now, let me give you a bit of background on why we've chosen Shaykh Abu Eesa Niamatullah specifically. Number one, Shaykh Abu Eesa Niamatullah is a Muslim traditionally trained scholar. He is also somebody who is a chair of, a vice chair of the Al-Qalam Sharia panel. So somebody who's already accountable to the community. He plays a very important role for somebody who has expertise in the Sharia. And his main focus, for those of you who don't know what Al-Qalam Sharia panel is, they focus mainly on Islamic finance, but also other fiqh and fatwa related to that. So some prominent scholars in the UK sit on that panel, and they do a lot of work in this area. Another area, another reason why we've taken Shaykh Abu Eesa Niamatullah and brought him to our panel is because he's somebody who is a pharmacist, so clearly has some kind of understanding about the science, and also somebody who has some understanding and experience about the manufacturing of drug products and dealing with drug companies. So he's somebody, again, I would categorize in amongst those people who are, number one, accountable to the community, number two, somebody who has good Islamic understanding, number three, somebody who has good understanding of the science as well as the industry. Our next panelist is Mufti Amjad Muhammad. So Mufti Amjad Muhammad is somebody who is also a scientist. I know Mufti Amjad for some time. He's somebody who's a colleague of mine in Bradford. So he's somebody who's very held highly as somebody who was adil, trustworthy in the community, has been studying for a number of different years. And he has something he doesn't always put forward to the forefront all the time, but somebody who is a scientist. He's clearly a scientist. He's worked in the science industry for a number of years and clearly has studied, and he holds his own Darul Ifta in Bradford, as well as he is the chair of the Ifta of Wifaq al-Ulama of UK. So clearly somebody who has a lot of accountability to the community, somebody whose reputation's on the line when he makes a statement. So therefore, another person who is accountable for what he has to say. So I'm sure everything he says would be with his own internal research. And then finally, we finish up with somebody who's another very special person, Dr. Aasim Padela. Now, I've known Dr. Aasim Padela for a number of years, and any of you who know him will understand how important he is to the Muslim community when it comes to the subject of Islamic bioethics. Now, Dr. Aasim Padela has his own organization, the Initiative on Islam and Medicine, somebody who's an acute medicine doctor, also a researcher, somebody who has worked with ulama for a number of different years. If I would say there's any kind of research on Islamic bioethics, if Dr. Aasim Padela is not involved, then I would be questioning the depth of that research and to what degree that research has contributed to world progression in this particular area of bioethics. So he's a very pivotal person. Use research on anything to do with Islamic bioethics, you would be guaranteed that you'll find some kind of article by Dr. Aasim Padela on that particular subject. So he's somebody who clearly is an international expert on Islamic bioethics. So from that perspective, we've got, alhamdulillah, an excellent panel of people. So please, if you are going to ask a question, please use our Q&A, and then inshallah what we'll try to do is we'll address the appropriate questions. We recognize, I've already explained for those of you who missed the initial part of this webinar, there are those three groups of people. We're focusing on the middle. We're not concerned about those people who believe in serious conspiracy theories, nor those who are sami'na wa ata'na, believe everything we hear. So on that basis, we're dealing with those people who seriously want to learn about this whole idea. So let me first begin. We've had Dr. Mohammed Munir talk about a couple of things. So we're going to come back to Dr. Mohammed Munir in a short while. But let me start with Shaykh Abu Eesa Niamatullah. Okay. Now, let's ask a real question here, Shaykh. As Muslims, can we trust these secular regulatory bodies and these pharmaceutical manufacturers? What is the Islamic perspective to accepting, trusting important medical advice from non-Muslim authorities, taking into consideration also even maybe the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, where he was treated by even non-Muslim doctors? So from our perspective, living in today's society, how trustworthy are they, and to what degree, from we're going to take an Islamic stance to this, should we approach this knowledge and information that we're receiving? Like, for example, what Dr. Munir has presented to us.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Jazakumullah khair. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum again, everybody, to my respected panelists, to everybody tuning in, and Jazakallah khair to Dr. Muhammad for his presentation. The reason that this question has become, for me personally, interesting, because actually it shouldn't be interesting, right? We kind of, sometimes we over, we kind of make things which have nothing really to do with religion, religious. And knowledge per se, in its generic sense, is knowledge. It's either, when you study, one of the interesting things when you start studying Arabic, when you start studying Islam, you have to start studying Arabic. As soon as you start studying Arabic, you are always taught right at the very beginning how to understand the concept of khabar, information. One of the interesting concepts of information is that it is either true or not true. And then you differentiate that as a statement of fact from an order. When someone gives you an order, those students remember the original days when you study usul, can a statement itself, in of itself, have the ability to be false or not? And one of the ways that you define a command is that it doesn't have the ability. It's information which is devoid of subjectivity. So again, information should not be politicized in that sense. It's either correct or not. And I think, unfortunately, we've allowed ourselves to kind of become a bit lazy in our own development of fiqh, and that we allowed our own Islamic kind of biases to affect information in the same way. It's very nice what actually Dr. Rafaqat said about the issue of all these panelists. They're all independent. They're all accountable to the community. Normally, we expect them to be Muslim and then to be qualified, etc., etc. That has always been our traditional line. And one of the and obviously it has many advantages because it then ensures that we get accurate and accountable information. But one of the side effects, one of the problems with this approach is that we can sometimes create unnecessary suspicion. And here, I mean unnecessary suspicion with non-Muslims or authorities which are not Islamic, for example, such as regulatory bodies, or for example, the government. What I want to put forward is that whenever you look in the books of fiqh, or maybe if you're studying a particular subject in our current time, or you're taking a fatwa that I need to go to the doctor and the doctor has to give a decision, is it okay or not to accept that decision? And it's a very controversial kind of issue, maybe to do with life support or whatever. You'll often hear the answer, as long as they're Muslim or trustworthy, and then a second one who's also got to be Muslim, untrustworthy. You'll often hear this kind of line. And the reason that you're hearing the scholars say that is because they want to make sure that mistakes obviously are not, there's not some particular extreme opinion that gets missed. A second colleague obviously fact checks, sanity check, all of that. But the Muslim part is something we have put in. It is not from our religion at its fundamentals, to absolutely insist that a person has to be Muslim to give us fatwa in this scenario. The reason that we ask for that is because we believe that person is going to be more attuned to our needs, is going to have a greater hold of the reality, but it's not a condition what we call bidhatihi, in of itself. And I think sometimes the Muslim community has now become obsessed that it needs to have an Islamic ruling here. The irony is that all of the four panelists that are in this call are actually irrelevant to this particular discussion. The virologist at the beginning is obviously, we have 2 qualified doctors, of course, that they have their position, but I mean, just assuming the panelists from their Islamic point of view. Actually, Dr. Muhammad is the only person who should have given this talk. He gave his points, he gave his evidences, and we should have accepted it. And we should have accepted it whether his name was Dr. Mohammed Munir or Dr. Joe Bloggs. It doesn't matter. It's knowledge that has to be weighed in of itself. So when the question is placed to us that should we have confidence and accept our regulatory bodies and our government agencies and so on and so forth, the answer should not be, and not, of course, Dr. Rafaqat was not intending that, but I want you, the audience, to understand that there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't. If they lie, then they reduce their trust in us. If they fraud us, we have no trust in them. If they speak the truth, then we have trust in them. If they speak a mixture of the truth and lies, then like every single decision that you have, you base it upon the majority. You base it upon the propensity of it to be likely, more likely. You use the evidences of normative, intellectual analysis. This has not actually got an Islamic requirement. The reason I say this is because at this moment in time, I know that there's a lot of suspicion around medical, the MHRA, for example, in the UK, and the Muslims are kind of now introducing, amongst other groups, the idea that there's some big kind of conspiracy, right? It's weird that you completely accept, adore, I would go even as far as worship, yani the kufr system that you live in, the information it feeds you every day, everything which you yourself are comfortable with. But when your own personal opinion decides to go against something because it's either been, it's biased or it's been affected by whatever you're listening to or what you're seeing, somehow Muslims, the Islam card has to be played. Is it now Islamic to listen to this? Do we need further conditions? Do we need further verification? We don't need further anything. Either they are saying what they're saying is correct and the evidence supports them, or it doesn't. Whether they're Muslim or not, non-Muslim or not, whether they are authority or not, that should be kept out of the side. And so that was a long way of going around, because I always like to, when I answer a question, to explain the principles, that there's absolutely no reason for us not to trust the authorities as long as the evidence is their track record. And it goes without saying that with this vaccine trial.
Shaykh Abu Eesa, that's
yes.
Jazakallah khair. So in essence, what you're saying is that there is no real condition of them being Muslim, just that they are certain people who hold a certain responsibility in the community, have the level of expertise,
exactly,
and that would suffice us to, and then for you to make that informed decision in terms of whether you accept it or not.